Welcome to What's Your Dream, a podcast that dives into the fascinating world of passions and aspirations. Today, we are here with Kim, a dedicated practitioner of equine gestalt therapy, a method where horses help guide individuals towards healing and self discovery. Her journey has led her to conduct empowering workshops for entrepreneurs, sharing insights and strategies for personal and professional growth. Beyond the therapy field and the entrepreneurial world, she's explored the realms of writing, authoring, and publishing two insightful books that resonate with those seeking inspiration and guidance. Join me as we embark on a journey of exploration and inspiration, where dreams are not just thoughts, but the seeds of our future. Hello, Kim. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Trisha. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to see you. And I'm really excited for this podcast.
Yay. I'm so happy for you to get these started. I tell you, podcasting is one of my favorite things. I am so thankful. A couple of years ago, we started the Business Animal podcast, and now I have two that I do, and I'm thinking of starting a third. So I, I truly love this medium as a format to communicate and also as entertainment. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, what's your third one going to be about?
So I want to do a podcast called Meaningfully Intertwined. As you know, as you're aware, I work with people's synchronicities. So I'm always fascinated by the things that people become aware of in the work that I do out in the world, and how those awarenesses like drop at these entire giant walls of barriers that they've experienced for their whole life. And just the simple act of becoming aware suddenly either removes the barrier or leapfrogs them really far forward. And so I want to do a podcast where I speak with people about the things in their lives that they have become aware of that have changed their lives for the better, either by removing that obstacle or by showing them that they really do have the capability to move themselves forward pretty easily. So, meaningfully intertwined is what I have named it, and getting ready to start on the guest list for the first few episodes. So, yeah, super pumped about it.
Very cool. Sounds like a lot of positive energy going on there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
certainly hoping so.
Yeah. All right. So this is our first question. It is, what is your biggest dream or aspiration?
So, my number one value in life is to make a difference. And if I'm fulfilling that, then I'm doing what I'm here for. And so, my biggest dream and aspiration is to just simply make a difference for people. And there are a few populations of people that are very near and dear to my heart. One of those populations is entrepreneurs. Obviously, I've worked with them for a lot of years. I've lived that life, I've experienced it, and I've experienced the highs and the lows with it. So, being able to help other people realize their highs and work through the lows of that particular area is fantastic. Another population that's very near and dear to my heart are artists. As a creative, I know how difficult it is to be in a world, especially now that where our own personal creativity feels a little sketchy with all the AI coming into the presence. And so that population is really needed to be able to work through what is coming down the pike for them that's adding to what was already a complicated situation. And then other populations of people I dearly love to work with are especially women who have experienced some type of trauma in their life that is holding them back from being who they really want to be and what they really want to be in their life. And again, personal reasons, having been that woman as well, I just, it's one of those things that I love to watch them being able to triumph. And basically, Trisha, to answer that question, my biggest dream is to do that all day, every day, helping people be able to get out of their own way and to realize where they want to go and to be able to make the difference for them.
Yeah. So let me ask you something, Kim. Don't you feel like that's what you're already doing every day?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. So I've been living the dream, so to speak,
Yep.
pretty much since well, for I would say very dedicatedly for the last decade or so. And even prior to that, I just really wasn't as aware of what was important to me or why that made sense for me specifically. But when I started working on my values and understanding who I was as a person and what really made an impact for me, that's when that came out. And I mean, it's everywhere in my life, right? I write, I do photography, all of the things that I do, my gestalt practice, hypnosis, all of my toolkit and everything that I bring to the table is all about making a difference for other people, whether that difference is a small difference that just matters in the moment or whether it's a big difference that is life changing.
Awesome. And what is the name of your book so our listeners can find it?
So perfect. There are two now. One is
Ooh,
getting birthed this next week, and they could not be more different. So the first one I wrote is called The Little Book of Big Sales Moves. And it's really to help people be able to sell in a conversational way. So not in a pitchy, I'm going to write a pitch and sell it, but to sell in a conversational way, which is much more in alignment with the majority of people I have as clients who are women. So women don't tend to do as well with the pitchy sales because it feels uncomfortable to us on multiple levels. And so this is conversational sales. That said, it can be used by men, it can be used by anybody. It's just a more comfortable way to sell. And the book is super short, it's under 100 pages, and it gives you very solid techniques on how to institute conversational selling. So that's book one. Book two is called The Gift of Gravel, and it's a collection of poetry that I've written since 2015 about living in a rural lifestyle and on ranches and farms. And what is important to me with that is that I grew up on a farm. I live on a farm. I'm a second generation rancher here. And I think when I was a little girl, um, farmers were heroes, right? They fed us and everybody kind of felt the they admired farmers. And somewhere in my existence on this planet, that got turned on its head. And people started really resenting farmers and agriculture. And I think it's a lot because they don't understand it because they don't live in it. So, what I wanted to do is write a collection of poems that, from an emotional level, um, bring you into understanding about what it's like to live in what I call kind of the blood and guts of life, which is what's here. It's glorious on some days and it's really tragic on others. And so that's what that book is about. It's called The Gift of Gravel. And both of them will be available. One is the sales book is already available on Amazon, but the other one will be available by the early 2024.
very cool. I love that. That's definitely an awesome accomplishment. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right. So the next question I have for you is what makes you feel grateful and full of joy today?
Well, getting that book published is
Mhm.
probably one of the biggest gratefuls and joys that I have. I'm feeling very for today thankful for my muse who is there to inspire me. And and when I say muse, it's really, the divine creativity that you carry inside of you. And I believe every single human on this planet has that, right? We're born in creation and we live in creation. And however that rides in with your particular belief system and faith, it works, right? Um, but for me today specifically, I'm feeling very grateful for that creative force inside of me that allows me to take what I see in the world, which is many times very positive, and bring it and put it into other people's lives in a way that they can experience that positivity. So, yeah, that's what I'm up for. Grateful today.
Very nice. Yeah, I always put you and I in the same bucket of creative ideas. We have a lot of ideas and it's like so many ideas. Sometimes it's hard to bring them all to fruition. So yeah, you definitely
It
know.
is. It is. I am overwhelmed with ideas. That is true,
Yes.
which is a
Yes.
good thing to be, I guess.
Yes. It is. It's a good problem to have. We just need some
Yeah.
implementers. Um,
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. The next question I have for you is, what are the most significant lessons you've learned throughout your life, and how have they shaped you as a person?
Mm. Well, so significant lessons that I've learned have been really related to showing up in the world as who you are. So, without getting into a lot of details, um, my family situation was very complicated as a little kid. I was adopted by my maternal grandparents, which made my biological mother my sister, never knew my biological father. And so I immediately landed in this planet with this very complex story, right? And so I had to learn how to walk through the world with this weird sort of story. And it was very obvious, and everyone talked about it because it was never held as a big secret. And there have been many times in my life when I've wished, like similarly, like, yeah, could you have lied to me a little bit? you know, um, and the truth was there were lies, but they weren't pertinent around things around that. But at any rate, I had to figure out who I was in the world because I came attached with all of this other stuff from all of these other people, like all of their, for lack of another term, BS, that they sort of interjected into my life even before I really took my first breath. And eh, growing up in that, and then trying to figure out who am I, and what is authentic to me, and what's been placed on me um in that process, it took a lot of years. I mean, I'm not going to lie, probably isn't even done,
Mhm.
but that really shaped who I became. And I feel now like when I connect them with those authentic pieces, and I even today kind of bring them back into myself again, it's like welcoming them home. And that makes me a more authentic person who's able to embrace myself, who's the poet and the horse girl and the writer and the gestaltist and all of the things that are authentically me. They all have this thread that runs through them that is authentic to who I am. But for a long time, I didn't know how those pieces all connected. And so I think it has shaped me as a person, figuring all of that out.
Yeah. And would you agree with the statement that you're just kind of remembering who you truly are?
Yes, and that comes up a lot for me. As a matter of fact, it came up in a pretty deep piece of work I did early on in this year, which has been a big year of discovery for me. Um, it, it was in a meditation, kind of a ritual situation. It was very, very powerful emotionally. And the big message I got was, remember who you are, remember who you are born to be, remember all of the ancestry that you carry with you, remember who you are. And so it has been a big theme for me this year. I do have my word for next year, which is
Mhm.
magic full, not magical, but magic full. And so I'm super excited to see what 24 is going to bring with that. But yes, remembering who I am, um, remembering who I am more than just in this body and in this lifetime was a key part of what I've experienced this year.
Amazing. Yeah. I got to figure out what my word is going to be for next year to meditate on that one.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, what inspires you and motivates you to keep going even when faced with challenges?
So I'm going to go back to one of the things I said earlier with making a difference for people. Um, as long as I can see that, as long as I can find that in the work that I do, I don't care what kind of monumental wall is in front of me, I can push through it. So it is an important thing for me to be able to find that in what I do. And when I find it, to be grateful for it. And so I and also I'm tenacious, right? I've learned a level of tenacity over my lifetime, especially being an entrepreneur. I don't know any entrepreneurs that have been at it for any length of time that don't learn to have some tenacity. The other thing I think that I'm really gifted with, that is a big thing when I became aware of it in my life, is I don't hold on to my failures.
Mm.
I have lots of ideas. We were talking about this thing of having like an overwhelming number of ideas. I have, and I'll run across them in the strangest places. Like we were moving a bunch of stuff a couple of years ago, and I found this box of business cards for this business that I had completely forgotten I ever had. It was helping people back in the 90s, so it's been a while ago. It was helping them set their computers up because computers were new to being in people's homes and they didn't know how to plug in all the cords and get them attached and understand how to open software. And it was back in the days when we had MS DOS, so it was a little more complicated than it is now. But the thing was is I had completely forgotten I'd started that business, and obviously it was not a success because it really never lived past that, box of business cards. But the fact that it was so far out of my awareness as a failure, I don't hold on to it. I don't hold on to where I fail. And so that means that when you're faced with a challenge, you don't hold on to this limiting belief that you can't make it to the other side of that. Because when you can let your failures go, when you can let the things that didn't quite work out be okay
Mhm.
and take that as a learning proposition, it means you can get forward faster. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not hanging on to something that might not be working so well just because you don't want to feel like a failure or be seen like a failure from other people. I love that.
Yeah, and like I said, it was so complete. My forgetting was so complete that I'm like, wow, here's this strange little business card. I'm like, I obviously thought enough of it to make business cards, and then I vaguely remembered it being part of my life for a hot minute, but it being gone, and then it never held me back for anything else that I do. So just the knowledge of that, I think, helps with the challenge facing piece of things, particularly.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. The next question is, what do you hope to leave behind in the world as your legacy? And then sometimes I actually put it this way is like, what do you want people to say about Kim at your funeral?
That she made a difference, that, she changed lives, that I changed people's lives, that people are in a better place because they knew me or because they followed something that I taught or put forward or in the work that they did with me, that it made the world a better place. I I love the world we live in, and there are days when I look around me and go, oh gosh, we're headed towards a disaster, and then I remember this is the human experience, right? It's not supposed to be beautiful and tied up in bows and pretty. That's not the way that we live. And that's one of the lessons from living on this ranch, is that, life can be really ugly at times, but the triumph is amazing when it is beautiful. And so the legacy that I want to leave is for people to access that beauty even in the worst moments in their life. So if I can leave some of that magic behind, I would feel a life well lived.
Yeah, very, very nice. I love that. And I think people don't realize it's like the longer you suffer from those situations is going to be the key to actually getting over them because we can't have perfect lives. If we did, we would have no idea what the alternative is. And we would just sit. I mean, we would probably be bored, honestly. And I can't tell you the last time that I actually got bored.
Well, that's one thing when you are an entrepreneur and you're doing a lot of
Yeah.
stuff and working with people, it's very rarely boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people think that, like, live in the country. Like, I know a lot of people think you live an hour from everything, and you live, like, my nearest neighbor is over a mile away.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people will go, how do you not get bored out of your mind there? And I can personally tell you there is something that will happen that will unbore you really quickly. The horses get out. There's wake up
Yeah.
in the morning and there's cows in your front yard. There's, I mean, there's so many things that you can do here to entertain yourself. Boredom is never really an option unless you really want to be bored. So yeah.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about real just quickly is the whole experience of the equine therapy that you do. I want you to
Mhm.
tell our listeners a little bit about that, and then I want to just mention something about whenever I came out to your ranch.
Sure. So, oftentimes, and I spend a lot of time as a person who's had a business professionally marketing things, right? This is one of the hardest things that I have ever had to try to explain to another human being because it honestly is something that you have to experience. And the best way I guess I can tell anybody about it is to relate what my experience was. So, in my 20s, I suffered a lot from depression. I actually was probably pretty depressed as a teenager, but was just too busy to notice. But in my 20s, I really had severe depression. And it ended up being a suicidal ideation and it was bad and I ended up seeing a therapist and it went absolutely nowhere fast. Like I did a lot of talk therapy. I they did drug therapy with me, so they prescribed me drugs. I didn't do the uh, illicit drugs. I did the ones that the doctors give you, and none of it really helped with the depression. And I'm going to tell you, I was functionally depressed. I owned a business. I operated that business. Did I do it well? No, but I did it well enough to pay my bills. I functioned well enough to get my clients where they needed to go, but life was not fun. And I really sort of accepted that that was kind of how things were going to be for me and that this was going to be as good as it was going to get. And then I met an equine gestaltist named Melissa Pierce. And the first time I saw a session, I begged her afterwards. I'm like, I have to experience this because all of those years I spent in talk therapy, all of the prescriptions that I took, they really didn't put a dent in it. But one session with her like cleared out so much garbage out of who I am. And it elevated me to be able to say, okay, now I can see because I can breathe a little bit, right? And then the next session, I could breathe a little bit more. And then the next session, I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to find out who I am and what's underneath all of this stuff that has been stacked on top of me. And you have experienced Gestalt, but one of the things that they did was they literally stacked things on top of me
Mm,
in the process. I remember having like, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 blankets on top of me, but that's how it felt to be
right.
who I was in that moment. And for me to break through that and say, I don't want this on me any longer and throw my hands up and throw the blankets off to the side. I know it sounds silly when you haven't experienced it, but it's a literal breakthrough, right? From that moment on, my body knew, like every cell of who I am knew. The ether in my spirit knew. My brain knew that I was capable of casting off those things that were weighing me down. And that's the power of Gestalt, right? Now, here's the thing the horses bring to it. The horses are bullshit meters. We lie to ourselves all of the time. We lie to ourselves through our culture. We lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves little pretty white lies. We tell ourselves ugly black lies that aren't even true about ourselves. We are constantly in the state of our conscious mind trying to rewrite everything that we're doing in a way that oftentimes we're not even aware of. And the horses are aware of it because it does show up in how we present ourselves. It shows up in our energy field, it shows up in our heart rate, it shows up in our body language. I'm not that good at identifying those things. Horses are masters at it. They communicate without sound. They can recognize another horse's intention from clear across the pasture. Humans were broadcasters, right? I mean, a horse can be as subtle as a little shimmy of flesh. Humans generally are not that subtle in the aspect. So, in partnership with those horses, as the gestaltist, the horse will show me where you are out of alignment because they communicate it very clearly to me. And I've spent my lifetime with horses understanding their body language and how they respond. Also, there's, I believe, a bit of magic in there. Horses have dedicated their lives to humans. This is a species of animal who put their hoof up and said, I'm going to walk with you people, even though you're going to eat me,
Mhm.
beat me, work me to death. I am going to walk with you until you become enlightened enough to learn my essential gift, which is to help you heal from the inside out. And horses do that. They've done it in a way that I realize everybody loves their dog, and I'm all for the dogs, even for the cats. But horses are different in what they've dedicated to humanity. And when you're in a pen with one, they bring that to the table too. And there is a little bit of magic in there, or a lot of magic, that really they inject it into you in the most unique and cool way. So that is in essence a long story into telling you about equine gestalt.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that you mentioned therapy, right? And all the years that you spent, all the years that I spent, and that people spend, just talking about the past and all of that. And I will say, with my experience with you and being at your ranch with King, was the horse's name, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you
So,
had king. He was black. Yeah.
yeah. And it was amazing. I mean, I was on my way there and I just had this, like, I knew I was getting ready to be emotional. And I had like I think I told you, like, the hardest times that I ever had in my life was when I was a teenager and we actually had horses. So literally, I'm pulling up to your farm and your ranch and just feeling all these emotions like, oh, I have no idea what's getting ready to happen. And I will say, like, all the years that I spent in therapy, like telling people the old story that I didn't want to keep writing. So I don't know why people talk so much about the old story. And so when I left your place, I think this switch happened of, okay, I dealt with that when I was there, right? All the different things that I've done. And then that exponentially helped me deal with the feelings I was feeling, not tuck them away. I still remember them, but not tell that story anymore and start telling my new story. And I think that it was amazing. I think the idea of just the horses that were there and what you were doing to feed off of them and then feed off of you and feed off of me, it was just a really, really enlightening experience. And so I would definitely suggest that to anyone, because I think the biggest thing is, like you had said, that horses are able to take our kind of negative energy and just let it go, where we aren't necessarily as able to be able to do that as humans.
Absolutely not. We get attached to things. Horses don't.
Yeah.
Horses don't hold attachments to negativity. They walk out in the pasture, they breathe it out, they let it go.
Yeah.
And we don't. We cling to those things. And there's a common saying in equine gestalt about leaving it in the sand of the arena. So it means it drop it in the sand. I think that it's easier for people to understand it as an electrical charge.
Mm.
So when you experienced trauma, whether that trauma was in your childhood or whether that trauma was 6 months ago in a sexual assault, or whether it was any kind of trauma that you've experienced. And I think people like to chalk trauma up in a scale, and trauma doesn't have a scale. Trauma is trauma,
Mhm.
no matter what it is, right? But what happens in our world is we don't let that trauma go. We cling to it, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows inside of us. And so every time we experience something that touches up against it, it's like an electrical charge. It shocks us. And then we react to that being shocked. What the horses in the gestalt process do is they remove the electrical shock so you can choose your response, because you can leave that charge in the sand of the
Mm.
arena and it doesn't affect you in the same way any longer. It doesn't change what happened. It can't rewrite history. But what we can do is we can take that electrical charge off of it, and then in that process you get to choose. And the power of choice is so key in what I do, because I do many times feel like that's what I give back to people, is their power to choose who they are as they walk through the world.
Yeah. The power to create their own life.
Yeah.
Yes. Very cool. All right. This is my last question. I can't promise it will be the very last one, but this is the last one for usually. What is one action you take every day to get closer to your dreams?
This one's a really simple one to answer, and I wished that everyone would do it, but here's my key to success. I show up.
Mhm.
And I see so many. I like work with entrepreneurs all day long, whether it's with the horses or whether it's in a classroom setting or whether it's doing consulting work. And so many times I have entrepreneurs who have they have these big dreams, right? They've got these big dreams that they want to make come true. And they sit and spend a lot of time dreaming, but they don't show up. They don't show up. And showing up means showing up when things aren't going your way, and showing up even when you're tired and sore, and showing up even when your feelings got hurt or when you fail. The thing that I think brings me closer every single day, or actually allows me to live my dream, which I do feel like I'm doing in many, many ways, is that I show up for it. And I think the ranch has taught me a lot about that, in the fact that there are animals here that don't eat if somebody doesn't show up. They will leave this space in one fashion or another. They'll either get out of their pens or they won't be alive anymore
Right.
if somebody doesn't show up. And it doesn't matter whether Nick, who is my son who helps with the chores, or I, if we are sick, if we are having a bad day, if we're depressed, if we have, I don't care what's going on. If there's, a civil war breaks out in this country, there's a horse out here that is going to have hay tomorrow.
Yep.
And so it teaches you that you need to show up. And I watch that in my clients. I watch them say, my dream failed. And I'm like, did you ever show up for your dream?
Right.
Did you ever come to your dream every single day and show up for it? No. Maybe show up once a month or once a week. It doesn't work that way. You got to show up every day consistently. And that's the action that I think most people miss out on taking.
Oh, yeah. And show up in not just for like, you have to show up for yourself, first of all, right? And not
Yeah.
everybody else first. Yourself first, then it comes everybody else. Because if you're, like you were saying about the horses, they're not going to eat if you're not here. So Kim has to show up for Kim first, right?
Yes. You have to
Yes.
show up.
Yep.
You have to show up for what you're doing. So that's the number one action the piece of advice that I give everybody. If you have this big dream that you want to follow, show up for it. And maybe showing up is hiring somebody like Trisha to be your coach. I mean, it's showing up sometimes helps if you have an accountability partner. So showing up is so important. And whatever you got to do to get that through in your life, do it
Yep. Yep.
without
Absolutely.
hesitation.
Yes. Love the accountability piece of it. All right. Is there anything that you want to share with our listeners today?
I just want to thank you, Trisha, for having me on here and for opening this space up for people to talk about their dreams. I just don't think we do that enough in our culture, in our world. We don't offer time and space to really sit in honor and in contemplation of each other's dreams or in our own dreams. So I just appreciate you so much for opening up this space for us to be able to do that, and for other people to be able to listen in so that they can get ideas on how to reach their dreams. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest, and I'm sure I'll see you around.
Absolutely.